Croeso bawb, I hope this finds you well. So here we are for our second video. Our first, that's actually a bit of a sermon. So I'm preaching tomorrow in my, well actually it'll be today, now by the time I upload this, but I'm preaching my first sermon in my Curacy Church. So, and it's the parable of the Good Samaritan, which I thought was such a wonderful, wonderful way to start. But here we are. You have to bear with me, I'm reading it. One thing I love is a story. As we've spoken about previously, I love all stories. And I'd love to hear some of your stories. I also have a couple of my own I'm going to share today. Now, I love the parable Jesus tells here. I love how he weaves the story into a lesson. And he does it so often and so effortlessly in all of the Gospels. But let's start at the beginning of today's particular story. In the New International Version of this particular Gospel from Luke, we're told, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" What must I do to inherit eternal life? Yeah, it's a nice, easy question, that one is, isn't it? I mean, between us, 4 or 5 of us, we could have that one banged out in about, what, an hour, maybe. Now, tennis, it ain't my thing. I'm not a big fan. But one thing that follows here, and it put me in mind of like a verbal tennis match, almost, between Jesus and this expert. Because Jesus returns the question, what's written in the law? How do you read it? Jesus here already shows that he's got the winning hand. He's got all the cards. Now, poker I can play. He's got all the cards. Because the man asking the questions is an expert in the law. And Jesus is not afraid to step into his arena, as it were. And the verbal tennis match continues until we get to our story, our parable, the Good Samaritan. The man in the story is simply journeying from one place to another. He's attacked. He's beaten. And through no fault of his own, he's robbed and left at the side of the road. We're told beaten half to death. Imagine the beating that would take to beat someone half to death. It would be one heck of a kicking, to be fair. But also imagine how the man must have been feeling. Scared, alone, and in pain. And then he sees it. A priest coming his way. He must have thought his luck had changed. Surely the priest's going to give him a hand. I mean, think of it right now. Anybody watching this, if you know a priest, you know they're the sort of person that if they saw you injured, they give you a hand. But what happens? No, the priest just keeps on walking. Next, a Levite approaches. Now, Levites tended to serve diaconal roles to priests. They assisted with the worship. So, of course, you're lying down at the side of the road. You see me walking towards you. You're going to think, oh, wow, he's a vicar. He's going to help. Nope. The Levite just keeps on walking. I imagine the poor guy that we're following here in the story has all but given up hope at this point. A priest and a Levite, a deacon, both just walk past you. Wow. After seeing you in that state, well, they cross the road and they avoid him. It's even worse. They actually avoid him and just that way. And then he sees him, the Samaritan. Now, typically, Jews and Samaritans, they weren't friends. Let's put it that way. And yet this Samaritan, this enemy, stops. And he helps our man. He helps our boy. He helps our hero of the story. He administers first aid. He puts the man on his donkey and he walks. He walks him to a place of safety. And there he even pays for the man's care. Now, what does he get out of this? What does he ask for in terms of something to be done for his generosity? Does he want help moving a sofa? Is he looking to make a new friend? No. He does it for one thing. Not for bragging rights because, I helped an enemy. No, nothing like that. He does it because it's the right thing to do. And it's those words again, isn't it? Love your neighbour. Those words have seen books written, sermons preached on them, whole movements created based on those three words: love your neighbour. Indeed, there's a really good cartoon I once saw, a meme I once saw, and I'm sure you can find it if you Google it. And Jesus is sat and he's preaching and he's got all the people around him. And he said something along the lines of, Jesus says, love your neighbour. And then somebody in the crowd shouts out and says, but Jesus, and it's something along the lines of, what if they're a different colour? What if they're a different gender? Or a different sexuality? And Jesus simply replies, did I stutter? Love your neighbour. It's so simple, isn't it? And yet, we find it so hard sometimes. And I'd share with you two stories from my own life, if you'll indulge me. Now, firstly, I was bullied a lot as a child. One day, I think I was about 7 or 8, I was walking around the town I grew up in, and a group of my bullies happened to see me, and they chased me. And in the pursuit, I ended up losing a shoe, of all things. One of my shoes just shot off. Now, I grew up poor, and I knew my mum would absolutely kick my ass because I'd lost a shoe. I mean, she would have chokeslammed me, But I kept running because, of course, I was terrified. I didn't want to get beaten up, and there was a big bloody crowd of them. And they'd almost caught me when this elderly fella was on his front garden, and he saw what was going on, and he stepped off his garden right into their path. And the authority in this man's voice, I mean, I don't know if he was an army officer or something, I'd never spoken to him before, but he just barked at them and they stopped. And he said to them, right, all of you disperse. And he sent them on their ways, except for one. He singled one of them out and he made him go fetch my shoe and bring me my shoe back. I think he must have seen it fly off or something. And once I'd gotten my shoe, he stood while I put it on, and then he walked me home. His gentle kindness on that walk home, because I was scared out of my mind. You can imagine, it was ugly crying and everything. I was scared out of my mind. And just the gentle kindness that this man showed me on that little walk home, it stayed with me from that day to this. But let's look at our own lives for a moment. If you're watching this, indulge me a second. Close your eyes and just listen to my voice. Think of a time you've needed a good Samaritan. Think of a time you were in need. Think of a time that someone has stepped in to help. They didn't get anything for it. They just did it because it's the right thing to do. Think of that situation. How bad was it? How did you feel when that help finally arrived? Go ahead and open your eyes. I'm going to share with you another story, if you'll indulge me, from the other side of the coin, as it were. When I was a teenager, I had a girlfriend who was a budding artist, and she took a night class at the local college. It's basically art. And I would wait for her to nearby McDonald's because why not? What else is a teenage boy going to do who's got zero interest and zero talent with art? And there was a homeless man who would sit outside this Mackey's, and he would ask for change as people left. And one day, I was sat inside and I was nursing some cheeseburger or something like that, I don't know. And I saw a steady stream of people walk out. And I think 4 or 5 of them just ignored him. I remember thinking, that ain't right. Dude just wants something to eat. That ain't right. So I took my meal and I went outside and I handed it to him. Mate, have that. And I sat with him outside and we just talked. I think her course lasted 2 hours. And we spent most of it just sat talking together. The following week, he was there again. So I rinsed and repeated. I did the exact same thing. And eventually, it almost became like a weekly meeting for him and I. I'd rock up, I'd buy two meals, whatever they were, cheeseburger, chicken wraps, whatever. I'd buy 2 meals, and we'd go sit. And sometimes we'd sit in the restaurant if it was cold, and if it was warm, we'd sit outside, and we'd just talk. And he told me so much of himself. He told me his story. And even after she finished her course, and even eventually, of course, after our relationship finished, I would still see this guy every Thursday evening. And it lasted for quite a long time. So let's shift the focus. Let's see what happens on the other side of that coin. Close your eyes again. Take a moment. Just listen to my voice. Breathe. Remember a time that you've been a good Samaritan, that you have been in a position to help. Whatever your act was, however you helped that person, what motivated you? Think about that and hold that for a moment. What motivated you? Open your eyes. Because you see, my brothers and sisters, that's the heart of this. The Good Samaritan, make no mistake, he saved that man's life. And as we walk along the journey of life, we're going to encounter those who have stumbled, those who have fallen, those who have been beaten and robbed like the poor guy from this story. Our call is a simple one. Love your neighbour. That's it. Be it a helping hand up, take my hand, get up. Be it a helping hand, binding wounds and taking someone to safety. However that looks, a simple shared meal, a good morning, a warm cup of tea on a cold winter's day. In following this command, we prove ourselves to be of Jesus. And at the end of today's gospel, Jesus asks the expert, the man who tried to test him, Jesus says to him, which of these 3 men do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the expert of the law, this man, answers him back and he says, well, the one who helped him, of course, the geezer had mercy on him. And so Jesus tells him, go and do likewise. The challenge is there. The gauntlet is thrown down. It's that simple. Go and do likewise. You want to impress me, slick? Do your job. Go and do likewise. That's what Jesus essentially says to him. And so, my brothers and sisters, that's the call. Not just for that day 2,000 years ago. It's a call for us today in 2022. Let's go out and let's do likewise. Let's be the Good Samaritan. Let's love selflessly. And let's help those that have fallen. God bless my brothers and sisters, and take care.